Every single morning, millions of Americans wake up at 5 a.m. to perform a bizarre financial ritual. You chug a stale Dunkin' iced coffee, open your laptop, and stare at a glowing screen filled with spreadsheets, Slack notifications, and stock charts. You tell yourself that if you just work harder, analyze more data, or find that one secret investment strategy, you will finally buy your way out of the corporate rat race. But you are wrong. The entire financial system has sold you a massive, highly profitable lie. They have convinced you that winning with money is a game of intelligence, math, and complex algorithms. It is not. Money is not a math problem. It is a behavioral defect. The market does not care about your high IQ, your Ivy League degree, or the fact that you can code circles around your peers in a Silicon Valley tech stack. The market only cares about your inability to control your own primitive impulses. If you cannot manage your emotions, your intellect is nothing more than a highly efficient tool for self-destruction. Think about two real people who perfectly expose this reality. The first is a brilliant tech executive who helped invent the very hardware that powers your office Wi-Fi network. He made tens of millions of dollars before he turned 35. He was a certified genius, but his relationship with wealth was fundamentally broken. He used to carry bricks of $100 bills in his designer briefcase just to flash them at bartenders. One afternoon, he handed $20,000 in cash to a junior developer and told him to sprint down to a jewelry store in downtown Manhattan to buy custom gold coins. When the developer returned, the executive took his friends out to a marina in Long Island and started skipping those $1,000 gold coins across the surface of the Atlantic Ocean like flat rocks. He did it simply because he could. He wanted to feel like a god. Where is that tech genius today? He is completely bankrupt, buried under a mountain of lawsuits, and living in a rented apartment. Now look at the second man. He spent his entire life working as a gas station attendant and a night janitor in rural Vermont. He never earned more than minimum wage. He did not understand complex financial derivatives, he did not trade options on Robinhood, and he never touched a tech stock. But he did one simple thing for 50 years. He took whatever tiny surplus he had, walked down to his local bank, and quietly bought shares of blue-chip American companies that he held until the day he died. When he passed away, his neighbors discovered he had $8 million sitting in his investment portfolio. He left millions to his local library and hospital. The high school dropout night janitor completely outperformed the multimillionaire tech genius. In what other field on planet Earth is that even structurally possible? You will never see a high school dropout perform a cleaner triple bypass heart surgery than a Harvard-trained medical professional. You will never see an untrained amateur design a more stable skyscraper than a licensed structural engineer. But in the world of personal finance, the amateur routinely obliterates the expert. That is because money is not a hard science. It is a soft behavioral skill. Success with wealth has almost nothing to do with what you know and everything to do with how you act when your brain's battery is completely drained at the end of a 10-hour workday. The masses spend their entire lives looking for the perfect financial shortcut. You download budgeting apps, read market newsletters, and scroll through financial forums looking for the ultimate hack. You are looking for a spreadsheet fix to a mirror problem. If you want to fix your bank account, you have to stop looking at the charts and start looking at the psychological flaws driving your daily choices. Let us dissect the first major illusion that keeps the American middle class broke. Call it the phantom status trap. Think about the last time you saw someone pull up to an upscale valet stand in a brand new $60,000 sports car. What was your immediate cognitive response?
You did not look at the middle-aged guy sitting behind the wheel and think about how successful he was. Your brain immediately bypassed the driver entirely. You imagined yourself in that driver's seat. You thought about how cool you would look if you were the one revving that engine. This is a brutal psychological paradox. The driver bought that vehicle to signal his elite status and command your admiration, but you completely ignored him. You used his expensive purchase as a visual prop for your own daydream. The guy in the luxury car is essentially invisible. He spent $60,000 of real capital to buy respect, but he ended up providing a free fantasy backdrop for strangers who don't even know his name. This exact phenomenon ruins your budget every single month. You order late-night DoorDash because you're too exhausted from Zoom meetings to cook, and it makes you feel affluent to have a stranger drop food at your doorstep. You buy premium clothing to wear to a corporate offsite, thinking your colleagues will judge your competence by the logo on your shirt. They won't. They're too busy worrying about their own presentation slides, their own job security, and what their boss thinks of them. Nobody is thinking about your stuff as much as you are. In fact, the very people whose respect you actually want are probably judging your flashy spending negatively. They know that a brand new car or a luxury watch usually doesn't mean wealth. It means high-interest debt and a massive monthly payment that binds you to your desk for the next 72 months. Every single dollar you spend to look rich is a dollar that can never be used to buy your actual freedom. To understand why your investments fail, you have to understand how the universe actually distributes rewards. The human brain is hardwired for linear outcomes. You expect that if you do 10 things, 8 of them should work out moderately well. But the financial markets operate on a power law distribution. This means that a tiny fraction of events drives the vast majority of the outcomes. Take a look at the actual data behind the greatest investment track record in human history. Warren Buffett has owned between 400 and 500 different stocks over his 70-year career. He made 90% of his total wealth on just 10 of those companies. Think about the mathematical implications of that reality. A billionaire investor who is widely considered a financial prodigy was completely mediocre or flat-out wrong on 98% of his stock picks. He survived because his few massive winners were so overwhelmingly large that they completely wiped out hundreds of individual losses. The exact same rule applies to your small business, your freelancing career, or your content creation side hustle. Most of your marketing campaigns will tank. Most of your digital products will generate 0 sales. Most of your videos will sit at 100 views. But one single breakthrough, one viral hit, or one high-paying client will pay for every single hour of wasted effort. The masses look at their initial failures and immediately quit. They assume that because their first 5 attempts went nowhere, they are bad at business. They don't realize that being wrong most of the time is simply the baseline cost of playing the game. The people who build real wealth are not smarter than you. They just have enough psychological endurance to handle being wrong long enough for their 2 or 3 massive wins to hit. But even if you understand the math, you will still lose everything if you do not respect the terrifying power of time. The human mind cannot naturally grasp the physics of compound interest. We process things additively, not exponentially. If I ask you to add the number 8 to itself 30 times, your brain easily calculates the linear progression. But if I ask you to multiply 8 by itself 30 times, your cognitive processing completely breaks down. When you look at the $84 billion that makes up Warren Buffett's net worth, your brain assumes he achieved that number by being a supernatural stock picker every single day of his life. But look closer at the timeline. Over $81 billion of that $84 billion was accumulated after he turned 65. He did not become a genius in his old age. He simply started investing when he was 10 years old. His skill was identifying decent companies, but his secret weapon was 80 years of uninterrupted compounding time. Imagine two professionals working in the same corporate office in Chicago. The first professional starts investing $300 a month at age 22. The second professional waits until age 32 because they want to spend their 20s enjoying their salary, traveling, and eating out. Even if the second person invests double the amount every month for the rest of their career, they will never catch up to the first person. Those 10 lost years create a financial gap that can never be closed by a higher income. The most valuable asset you own is not your paycheck. It is the number of years you have left before you need to touch your principal capital. Every single month you spend hesitating, waiting for the market to look safer, or waiting for a salary raise is a month of compounding you are permanently burning away. This brings us to a deeply personal psychological barrier. Call it the projection trap. The moment you decide to break away from the traditional middle-class script, everyone around you will start acting like you are completely insane. Your coworkers will look at you sideways when you bring a packed lunch to the office instead of spending $25 at a trendy salad spot down the street. Your parents will panic when you talk about leaving your stable corporate role with comprehensive health insurance to launch a solo digital agency from your kitchen table. Your partner might get anxious when you choose to deposit your year-end bonus into a brokerage account instead of booking an expensive tropical vacation to show off on social media. You need to understand a fundamental law of human behavior. You are not crazy, and neither are they. Every human being writes their own internal financial script based on the specific economic landscape they survived during their formative years. If your parents grew up watching their own families lose everything during a massive housing collapse or an industrial recession, their entire brain is wired to view risk as a lethal threat. They value the illusion of corporate security above all else because they remember the visceral panic of an empty bank account. If your friends grew up watching internet entrepreneurs build massive digital brands from a laptop, their risk tolerance is fundamentally shifted. The mistake you are making is trying to argue with people who are reading from a completely different script. You waste massive amounts of mental energy trying to justify your choices to people who are incapable of seeing the world through your lens. Stop explaining your money decisions. Stop trying to convince your family that your side hustle is viable. Stop trying to prove to your coworkers that index funds are better than a new car lease. When they question your lifestyle, give them a deadpan response. That works for you, this works for me. Then instantly change the subject. Your bank account does not need validation from people who are trapped in the very system you are trying to escape. If you do manage to break free and build significant capital, your next and most dangerous enemy is not the market, it is your own greed. The hardest financial skill on the planet is getting the goalposts to stop moving. Think about a high-ranking corporate executive who came from a background of absolute poverty to become the global CEO of a prestigious management consulting firm in Manhattan. By the time he reached his 50s, his net worth crossed $100 million. That's not just retirement money, that's multi-generational wealth that ensures his great-grandchildren never have to work a single day in their lives. But he regularly sat in boardroom meetings next to billionaires. He looked at his $100 million and felt poor. To close the gap, he began using his position on the board of major financial institutions to engage in illicit insider trading. He leaked confidential corporate secrets to a hedge fund manager in exchange for millions of dollars in kickbacks. He took a massive fortune that he already had and desperately needed for his freedom, and he risked it all to chase a slightly larger fortune that he did not have and absolutely did not need. He was caught by federal investigators, his reputation was thoroughly destroyed in the media, and he spent years in a federal prison. This is not a unique flaw reserved for Wall Street elites. You perform a mini version of this exact self-sabotage every time you risk your stable financial baseline to chase a high-risk dopamine hit. You take the money you need for your mortgage or your emergency fund, and you throw it into volatile meme coins or high-leverage options contracts because your friends on Discord are bragging about their overnight returns. You are letting your lifestyle expectations outpace your asset growth. The moment you earn more money, you immediately upgrade your apartment, sign a lease on a more expensive vehicle, and subscribe to more monthly services. You are running on a hedonic treadmill that moves faster with every raise you get. If you do not define what enough looks like before you start, you will always be one step away from financial ruin, no matter how many zeros are at the end of your paycheck. To survive the financial game, you must also come to terms with the brutal reality of luck. The human ego despises the concept of random chance. When you land a high-paying client, get promoted to a director role, or make a lucky stock play, your brain instantly attributes the outcome entirely to your own work ethic and superior strategy. When things go sideways, you blame the economy, a bad algorithm, or a toxic manager. Consider the parallel lives of two childhood friends in the late 20th century. They were both brilliant, hyper-driven, and shared an identical vision for the future of personal computing. One of them happened to attend one of the only high schools in the United States that possessed a type-teller terminal computer. His name was Bill Gates. The odds of him attending that specific school at that specific moment in human history were literally 1 in a million. He possessed incredible drive, but he also walked into an unprecedented pocket of structural good luck. His closest friend and classmate was just as smart and co-authored their early software projects, but before graduation, he was killed in a freak mountaineering accident. The odds of a high school student dying in a climbing accident in the United States are also roughly 1 in a million. Two identical minds, two identical levels of ambition, facing opposite sides of the exact same extreme probability curve. One became the richest man on earth, the other became a memory. You are completely underestimating how much of your current position is the result of random cosmic luck. That corporate job you have was only vacant because the previous employee had an unexpected family emergency and moved away. That client signed with your agency only because your cold email hit their inbox 5 minutes before their current provider made a catastrophic error.
Because luck can make you rich, bad luck can make you broke just as fast. The people who maintain multi-million-dollar portfolios for decades are not the ones who optimize for maximum gains during a market boom. They are the ones who design their lives to survive the worst possible luck when the system inevitably corrects itself. The masses constantly confuse two entirely different disciplines, getting money versus keeping money. Getting money requires high risk, unyielding optimism, and putting yourself out into the competitive landscape. It requires you to be aggressive. But keeping money requires a completely opposite psychological software. Keeping money requires humility, paranoia, and the acute awareness that everything you have built can be stripped away from you in a matter of weeks. Look at the historical trajectory of Jesse Livermore, one of the most legendary short traders in American history. During the massive stock market crash of 1929, while the rest of the nation was losing everything, his short positions made him the modern equivalent of $3 billion in a single 24-hour window. He was one of the wealthiest men alive. But just 4 years later, he entered the market with the exact same aggressive, high-risk mindset that made him rich.
He ignored the changing landscape, leveraged his positions to the absolute limit, and lost every single penny. He ended up taking his own life in a Manhattan hotel cloakroom. You are making a similar structural error when you apply your aggressive income generation tactics to your wealth preservation. You work 80 hours a week to scale an online business to $30,000 a month, and then you assume you can keep that money by aggressively day trading individual tech stocks or buying unproven real estate deals with massive debt. You are using an offensive weapon to play defense. The math of loss is incredibly unforgiving. If your investment portfolio drops by 50% during a market downturn, you do not need a 50% gain to get back to even. You need a 100% return just to cross the break-even line. That is why capital preservation matters far more than chasing the highest possible yield. You get bold to build your initial stack, but the moment you get ahead, you must instantly switch your mental operating system to pure survival mode. The ultimate question you must answer is this: what are you actually buying with your money? The masses use their capital to buy physical indicators of success. They buy the luxury SUV, the suburban home with the massive mortgage, and the premium subscriptions that make daily life feel comfortable. But all of those things are depreciating liabilities that tie you down. The only asset truly worth buying is absolute control over your morning calendar. The highest dividend that wealth can possibly pay you is the ability to wake up on a Monday morning, look at your schedule, and realize you can do whatever you want with whoever you want for as long as you want. That is real freedom. If you have $50,000 sitting securely in a high-yield account, it means you can look a toxic manager in the eye during a performance review and walk out the door without worrying about how you will pay your rent next month. It means you can take a 6-month break from your career to spend time with a sick parent without begging a corporate human resources department for unpaid leave. Most people use their money to buy objects that trap them into working longer hours to pay off the debt on those very objects. They trade their sovereignty for status symbols. Every single dollar you spend to impress a coworker at an office happy hour is a direct trade-off against your future autonomy. If you want to know what your ego actually costs you, track your bank statements for the last 30 days. Isolate every single expense that was designed to make you look successful, affluent, or cultured to the outside world. Look at that total number. That is not a dollar amount. That is the exact number of hours you are forcing yourself to remain a corporate servant. This realization forces us to acknowledge a fundamental truth that most people refuse to accept. Real wealth is what you do not see. We are culturally trained to judge an individual's financial success by their explicit consumption. If someone drives a high-end German car into a corporate parking lot or posts pictures from a 5-star resort in Europe, our brain automatically labels them as wealthy. But that is a profound logical error. What you are actually witnessing is not wealth, it is spending. And spending money is the exact mathematical opposite of possessing wealth. Think about a regular professional who works as a senior software consultant. He drives a brand new leased Porsche, lives in a downtown high-rise apartment, and wears bespoke suits to every client meeting. Everyone in his social circle assumes he's independently wealthy. But behind closed doors, his car is repossessed because he missed 3 consecutive payments. He has $0 in his retirement account, and he's 1 missed paycheck away from complete eviction. He has a massive income, but his wealth is exactly 0. Meanwhile, a quiet accountant lives in a modest 2-bedroom home, drives a 10-year-old Japanese sedan, and wears basic clothes from a department store. His peers think he's struggling or completely unremarkable, but his automated brokerage accounts contain $3 million in low-cost index funds that are compounding quietly every single day. The tech worker is running a fake wealth strategy that relies on loud, visible consumption. The accountant is running a real wealth strategy that relies on invisible capital. Real wealth is the luxury upgrades you deliberately decline. It is the expensive restaurant meals you choose not to eat. It is the premium car payment you refuse to take on. Fake wealth gives you short-term social status and long-term financial anxiety. Real wealth gives you absolute silence, peace of mind, and options. The formula for actual wealth generation is so simple that almost everyone completely ignores it because it doesn't offer a dopamine hit. Getting rich is simply a function of maintaining a wide, permanent gap between what you earn and how much you spend. That is the entire secret. You can make $500,000 a year as a specialized surgeon in Los Angeles, but if your lifestyle burns through $510,000 a year, you are structurally broke. You are trapped in an incredibly high-stress financial cage. You can make $50,000 a year as a remote virtual assistant, but if you strictly live on $35,000 and compound the rest, you are on a guaranteed path to permanent sovereignty. The corporate world wants you to believe that the only way to get ahead is to constantly hustle for the next promotion, the next salary bump, or the next high-paying client. They focus entirely on the income side of the equation because it keeps you dependent on their infrastructure. But your income is heavily taxed, and it's largely controlled by external forces like your manager, the state of the economy, and company layoffs.
Your spending, however, is completely within your control. Think about it through first principles math. There are two distinct ways to put an extra $1,000 in your bank account at the end of the month. You can fight for a salary raise that gives you an extra $1,000 gross, or you can cut $1,000 of waste out of your current personal budget. If you chase the income raise, you have to deal with federal income taxes, state taxes, and corporate red tape. You might only keep $600 out of that $1,000 after the government takes its cut. But if you cut $1,000 of unnecessary subscription stacks, luxury convenience deliveries, and impulse shopping out of your life, you keep 100% of that money. Saving money is a tax-free raise that you can give yourself this afternoon without asking a single boss for permission. To successfully execute this strategy, you must stop trying to be perfectly rational and start focusing on being highly reasonable. The world of academic finance treats human beings like cold, calculating spreadsheets. They assume you will always make the mathematically optimal choice to maximize your returns. But you are not a spreadsheet. You are an emotional, biological organism with deep-seated fears, insecurities, and a need for psychological safety. Consider a historical medical case study that perfectly illustrates this dynamic. In the early part of the 20th century, a European physician won the Nobel Prize for discovering a treatment for advanced syphilis. His method was completely counterintuitive. He intentionally injected his patients with malaria to trigger a massive high-grade fever. The logic was that the extreme heat of the fever would kill the fragile syphilis bacteria. It worked beautifully, even though a small percentage of the patients died from the malaria itself. It was a mathematically rational solution to a lethal disease. But think about any modern parent today. When your child develops a fever, your immediate emotional reaction is to give them medicine to cool their body down. Even though medical science tells us that a moderate fever is the body's natural mechanism for fighting off an infection, we cannot stand to watch our children suffer through the heat. We prioritize immediate comfort and peace of mind over raw biological optimization. Your financial portfolio works the same way. The mathematically perfect plan is rarely the plan you can actually stick with when the world is melting down around you. There are academic economists who have won Nobel Prizes for designing perfect algorithmic investment formulas that maximize capital efficiency through heavy use of debt and market timing. But when you look at how those exact economists manage their personal family money, they often split their capital 50-50 between basic stocks and low-risk bonds. Why? Because they know that when the stock market drops 40%, they do not want to lie awake at 3 a.m. sweating over their net worth. They want to sleep soundly at night.
If you are beating yourself up because you chose to pay off your low-interest student loans or your home mortgage early instead of investing that money into the stock market for a slightly higher historical return, stop. Mathematically, it might have been an inefficient choice, but behaviorally, if eliminating that monthly debt payment allows you to breathe easier, work with less anxiety, and sleep through a market crash without panicking, it is a brilliant financial decision. An investment strategy that maximizes your returns on paper means absolutely nothing if you lack the emotional fortitude to hold it when the market enters a brutal correction. The ultimate illusion that traps corporate professionals is the belief that history is a reliable map for the future. You look at past data, study historical market returns, and analyze economic charts to predict what will happen next. You assume that because a major economic crisis has never happened in a specific way before, it cannot happen now. This is a massive cognitive error. The most dangerous events in human history are always the ones that have no historical precedent. Think about the sheer randomness that governs our reality. Billions of human beings lived through the 19th and 20th centuries, but if just 5 specific individuals had never been born, men who altered the geopolitical and technological landscape through sheer force of will or catastrophic violence, the modern United States would look completely unrecognizable today. A few highly volatile, completely unpredictable events control the vast majority of our historical trajectory. When a major financial collapse hits, the analysts on television always claim it was an unprecedented black swan event that nobody could have seen coming. They say it as an excuse for their lack of foresight, but things that have never happened before happen all the time. The solution to an unpredictable world is not to spend your energy trying to project the next market cycle or identify the next economic crash. The solution is to build a lifestyle that is fundamentally anti-fragile. You must build a massive margin of safety into your daily operational budget. If your business or your career requires everything to go perfectly just for you to break even, you're playing a lethal game of financial roulette. The world will not ask you if you are ready before it shifts the landscape. It will simply change the rules overnight, and your survival depends entirely on the size of the buffer you built when times were good. This requirement for a buffer means that high-performance individuals must always possess a robust backup plan. Think about a commercial airline pilot. They don't calculate the exact amount of fuel required to reach their destination under perfect weather conditions and carry only that amount. They fill the tanks with massive amounts of extra fuel because they anticipate headwinds, mechanical delays, and unexpected route changes. Your vehicle has a spare tire in the trunk not because you expect to get a flat tire today, but because you accept the reality of random puncture risks on the highway. Yet when it comes to their personal careers and finances, the masses plan for flawless execution. You tell yourself that you will definitely get your annual corporate bonus, your online store will maintain its current growth rate, and your tech investments will continue to climb linearly. You run your life at maximum capacity with zero margin for error. Then reality strikes. A client cancels their contract, a major software update breaks your automated sales funnel, or your department undergoes a sudden corporate restructuring. Because you had no backup plan, you are instantly forced into panic mode. You start making desperate choices, taking out high-interest personal loans, or accepting toxic freelance work just to cover your immediate burn rate. The absolute winners in this game are not the ones who create the most elegant business plans or project the highest revenues. They are the ones who design their lives to survive when their primary assumptions are completely wrong. You need a dedicated cash cushion that sits quietly in a separate account, earning a basic return, doing absolutely nothing exciting. The masses look at that stagnant cash and think it's a wasted asset because it's not actively beating inflation in the market. They don't realize that boring, stagnant cash is the ultimate insurance policy that keeps you in the game when your exciting plans completely fall apart. To build a plan that lasts for decades, you must also come to terms with a deeply uncomfortable truth. You are a fluid, ever-changing organism. The career goals, financial desires, and lifestyle dreams you have at age 22 are highly unlikely to match what you will want at age 42. Think about a common professional trajectory. A young student enters a highly competitive university with a singular, hyper-focused obsession. They want to become a high-earning corporate defense attorney in a major city. They sacrifice their social life, study 16 hours a day, accumulate massive student debt, and finally land a coveted role at a prestigious law firm. They achieved their exact dream through sheer work ethic. But 20 years later, you meet them at a coffee shop, and the first words out of their mouth are an admission of deep professional misery. The 80-hour work weeks, the constant corporate litigation, the high-stress environment, and the complete lack of time with their family have turned their dream into a psychological prison.
Psychologists call this cognitive blind spot the end of history illusion. We are fully aware of how much we have changed in the past, but we mistakenly assume that our current self is the final, finished product. We believe we will want the exact same things for the next 40 years. This is why locking yourself into an incredibly rigid, high-overhead financial plan is a form of structural self-sabotage. If you buy a massive, expensive house that requires 2 high-stress corporate salaries just to maintain the mortgage for 30 years, you are making a massive gamble. You are betting that the future version of yourself will gladly tolerate that corporate stress for the next 3 decades. Do not overcommit to a lifestyle that robs you of your future flexibility. True wealth is the accumulation of luxury objects that chain you to a specific desk. True wealth is the ability to pivot your entire life on a dime the moment your internal priorities shift. This brings us to a critical rule for filtering out the immense amount of financial noise in the modern digital landscape. You must realize that everyone around you is playing a completely different game. When you open a financial news app or log on to a social media platform, you see thousands of conflicting opinions on what you should do with your money. One expert tells you to buy high-growth tech stocks, another tells you to flip real estate, and a third tells you to hoard cash. You assume they are all looking at the same market and debating the correct answer. They are not. They are operating on entirely different timelines, with entirely different risk tolerances and entirely different ultimate objectives. Think about the stock of a massive electric vehicle company trading at a high price point. A short-term day trader looks at that chart and thinks the stock is an absolute buy because it has strong momentum and might climb another 5% before the closing bell. To him, the underlying fundamentals of the company are completely irrelevant. He only cares about the next 60 minutes. But a long-term retirement investor looks at that exact same stock price and thinks it is completely insane because the company's actual revenue cannot possibly justify the valuation over the next 20 years. Who is right? Both of them are right. They are simply playing entirely different games with completely different rules. The catastrophe occurs when you start taking financial advice from people who are playing a different game than you are. If you are a long-term investor building a portfolio to buy your eventual freedom, and you start taking asset recommendations from a hyper-aggressive options trader on YouTube, you are practically begging for financial ruin. Before you read a single market report, buy a single asset, or listen to a single piece of career advice, ask yourself one question. What game is this person playing, and does it match mine? If their timeline or their risk profile does not align with your specific personal thesis, drop their advice instantly. Filter every single piece of data through your own structural game plan. If your game plan is long-term wealth accumulation, you must understand the true cost of entry. The financial markets offer massive historical returns, but those returns are absolutely not free. They carry a high price tag, but that price tag does not arrive in a neat bill. It is paid in the currency of fear, stress, chronic uncertainty, and emotional volatility. Look at the actual data of a typical stock market index over a long period. On paper, it looks like a smooth upward trajectory that compounds at roughly 10% per year. It looks like an easy wealth machine.
But when you look at the day-to-day reality of holding that index, the statistics are shocking. For roughly 94% of the time you own those assets, your portfolio is actively sitting below its previous all-time high. This means that for the vast majority of your investing life, you are watching your hard-earned savings fluctuate, drop, and stall out for months or even years at a time. This is the baseline admission fee required to secure those life-changing, long-term returns. The masses enter the market wanting the wealth, but they refuse to pay the fee. The moment the market enters a standard 15% correction, panic sets in. They assume they are being punished for a mistake or that the system is broken. They pull their capital out of the market, lock in their losses, and vow to wait until things look safe again. By doing this, they are trying to sneak into the amusement park without buying a ticket. They want the rewards of volatility without experiencing the discomfort of the drawdown. But the market always catches the gatecrashers. They end up buying back in when prices are high, selling when prices are low, and thoroughly destroying their capital efficiency. You must reframe market drops in your mind. A 30% drop in your net worth during an economic downturn is not a legal penalty for doing something wrong. It is simply the emotional fee you must pay to achieve financial sovereignty. Once you accept that reality, you stop checking your portfolio every morning, you stop reacting to the daily news cycle, and you quietly pay the price of admission while the masses run for the exits. To summarize this entire behavioral philosophy into a single operational framework, you only need to follow 6 simple rules that actually work for normal human beings. First, cultivate extreme humility when your investments and businesses go well, and exhibit extreme self-forgiveness when things go sideways. Both outcomes are heavily influenced by random cosmic luck you cannot control. Second, save money without a specific consumption goal. Do not save just to buy a car or a house. Save money simply for the sake of saving. A mountain of uncommitted cash sitting in your bank account is the ultimate tool for personal optionality when life inevitably throws an unexpected curveball your way. Third, manage your assets in a way that prioritizes your ability to sleep soundly at night over raw mathematical optimization. If a high-yield strategy gives you chronic anxiety, it is a terrible strategy for you as a biological organism. Fourth, dramatically extend your time horizon. Stop thinking about the next fiscal quarter or the next tax year. Start thinking in terms of full decades. Time is the single most powerful multiplier in existence. Fifth, become deeply comfortable with the reality of failure. Accept that most of your individual ideas, marketing plays, and investments will go nowhere, and your success will be entirely driven by a few massive, asymmetric winners. Sixth, use every single dollar of your surplus capital to buy back control over your daily calendar. Not having control over your time is the single greatest drain of human happiness that money can solve. The final piece of this internal narrative is understanding the profound impact of the internal narratives we tell ourselves. The economy is not a physical machine driven by concrete engineering laws. The economy is a massive collection of stories that millions of people choose to believe at the same time. Look at what occurred during the massive financial crisis of 2008. In the matter of months, the American economy lost $16 trillion in wealth, and 10 million jobs disappeared. But think about the physical reality of the country during that period. The physical factories did not evaporate. The highways did not collapse into dust. The computers did not forget how to process code. The collective human knowledge of our workforce remained completely intact. If an extraterrestrial life form had visited the United States in 2007 and returned in 2009, they would have seen the exact same physical infrastructure. So what actually changed? The story changed. In 2007, the collective narrative was that home prices always climb, the system is invincible, and debt is harmless fuel. In 2009, the narrative flipped to complete doom. The financial system is a house of cards, everything is collapsing, and we are entering a permanent depression. The physical world remained identical, but the internal story completely shifted human behavior across the planet.
This exact narrative shift occurs inside your own mind every single day. If you tell yourself a story that the economic system is completely rigged against your generation, that you will never escape your W-2 corporate job, or that you are inherently bad with money, your actions will instantly align with that narrative. You will take fewer calculated risks. You will spend your excess capital on immediate lifestyle cheap thrills because you assume saving is pointless, and you will miss high-value opportunities right in front of your face. Your financial reality is not shaped by the numbers on your bank dashboard. It is shaped entirely by the behavioral software running in your brain. Change your internal narrative from an excuse-driven script to a data-driven behavioral protocol, and your capital will follow. The primary reason the masses cannot change their narrative is that they are hopelessly addicted to financial pessimism. Open any media platform, check your social media feeds, or look at the headlines on a major news network. You are bombarded with an unyielding stream of negative noise, impending market crashes, mass corporate layoffs, soaring inflation, and economic doom. You rarely hear a headline stating that the American economy grew at its standard 3% rate this year, or that the long-term stock market rose over the last decade, as it always does. Why is good news completely invisible while bad news dominates your attention? Because optimism is inherently boring, while pessimism sounds like an urgent, high IQ warning. If a financial analyst stands on a stage and tells you that things will probably be fine over the next 10 years because human innovation and market forces will solve our current problems, you shrug your shoulders, label them as naive, and scroll past. But if an analyst stands up and screams that a catastrophic market crash is going to wipe out 70% of your retirement funds by next month, you stop everything you are doing, mute your notifications, and listen to every single word they say. Your brain is a biological organism that evolved to prioritize immediate threats over slow, long-term growth. That primitive mechanism kept your ancestors alive when they had to evade physical predators in the wild. But that exact same threat detection mechanism makes you a terrible modern investor. It forces you to worry about financial phantoms that do not exist, causing you to constantly trade out of your long-term positions out of sheer panic. Turn off the financial news for 30 days. Mute the hyper-reactive commentary accounts on social media. Check your actual portfolio once a month just to log the numbers, and let the slow, silent engine of human progress do the heavy lifting for you. When you strip away all the academic theories and look at how the master operators actually manage their personal wealth, the ultimate conclusion is clear. Prioritize absolute independence over raw financial optimization. The end goal of this entire game is to build a life where you do not have to answer to a toxic boss, you do not have to look at a price tag before ordering dinner, and you do not have to trade your health for a stable paycheck. Look at how the most strategic minds structure their personal affairs. They don't maximize their leverage to buy the largest possible mansion or squeeze out an extra 2% return by taking on high-interest risk. They often live in modest homes with zero debt. They keep a massive portion of their net worth, sometimes 20% or more, sitting entirely in basic, boring cash. From a purely academic standpoint, that cash drag is an inefficient move that costs them millions of dollars in potential market gains over a lifetime. But from an emotional and behavioral standpoint, that cash barrier ensures they never enter a state of panic. It ensures they never have to liquidate their long-term stocks during a market crash just to pay their bills. It makes them completely immune to external corporate pressure. They do not optimize for maximum revenue. They optimize for maximum psychological safety and uninterrupted sleep. The point of this entire breakdown is not to copy their specific portfolio allocations. The point is to identify exactly what you want your capital to do for your actual life. Stop playing the game the way the financial industry wants you to play it. Stop using your money to look successful to strangers you do not even like.
Use your capital to buy your time back, build an unbreakable buffer against bad luck, and design a lifestyle that gives you absolute personal sovereignty from this day forward.